All right, today we're doing something a little different. We are putting one of Christianity's most foundational documents, the Nicene Creed, under a philosophical microscope. We're going to walk through a fascinating argument that claims this ancient statement of faith might just contradict itself, using the very logic it was built on.
So how in the world do you test a 1600-year-old creed for logical consistency? Well, you start with a rule that's even older, Aristotle's law of non-contradiction. It's a pretty simple idea, right? A thing can't be both true and false at the same time in the same way. And believe it or not, this one little rule is the engine for the entire argument we're about to explore.
And that really gets us to the heart of the matter. See, this isn't about some outside attack on faith. It's framed more like an internal audit. The argument essentially asks, can the Nicene Creed actually hold up to scrutiny when you use its own foundational ideas, like God's absolute perfection and unchanging nature? It's a pretty bold challenge, and it comes from within.
Now, before we get to the main event, this supposed collision, we've got to understand the two things that are on a crash course. First up, we have the philosophical foundation. The source we're looking at lays out 5 core axioms that it says are the absolute, non-negotiable bedrock of classical theism. The point is, these aren't optional extras. They are the rules of the game. Let's see what they are.
Okay, first, the top of the mountain. God is the maximally great being. This is that classic idea, you might have heard it from philosophers like Anselm. It doesn't just mean God is the strongest thing around. It means God is the very definition of perfection, the ultimate ground of all reality itself. And right on the heels of that first axiom, the second one just makes sense. Perfection cannot become imperfection. If something is truly perfect, it can't even have the potential to become less perfect. That potential for failure would, by itself, be an imperfection. So this isn't about God choosing not to fail. The argument is that it's logically impossible. This whole idea of unchanging perfection leads us straight to axiom number 3. The supreme being is absolutely immutable. It cannot change, period. And why is that? Well, because any change would mean it either lacked something before and got better, or it lost something and got worse. And both of those are totally impossible for a being that is already maximally great.
Axiom 4, this one is a bit of a mind-bender. It's called divine simplicity. What it means is that God has no separate parts or attributes. So God doesn't just have wisdom or have power. God is wisdom. God is power. Now this is a super critical point for the argument because it means you can't just temporarily, say, turn off an attribute like omniscience without changing the very essence of what God is.
And the fifth and final axiom is maybe the most straightforward of all. The supreme being cannot have a God. It's right there in the definition. To have a God over you means you're not at the top of the food chain. Saying I have a God is really just another way of saying I am not the ultimate source of reality. Okay, so with these 5 logical rules on the table, the stage is officially set.
All right, so we've got our 5 axioms. You can think of them as the philosophical laws of the case. Now it's time to bring in the defendant, the specific claims from the Nicene Creed that are about to be put to the test.
The source really zooms in on 3 key claims from the Creed. First, that the Son is fully God, made of the exact same divine stuff as the Father. The famous Greek term for this is homoousios. Second, that this same divine Son also became a real human being, and that meant experiencing real human limitations like ignorance and suffering. And third, and this is a huge piece of evidence for the argument, that even after his resurrection, the Son calls the Father my God. And here we go. This is the moment of impact. The whole argument is that when you put those Nicene claims right next to the 5 axioms, you don't get a nice, neat picture. You get a head-on collision. So let's break down the first alleged contradiction. Okay, on one side of this collision, we have axiom 3, staring us in the face. The supreme being is absolutely, completely unchangeable. It can't be altered in any way because change itself would imply some kind of imperfection. And on the other side, you have the incarnation. The Nicene Creed says that the Son, who is this unchangeable God, takes on a real human nature. And the Bible is pretty clear. As a human, he experienced all kinds of real change. He grew, he learned things, he suffered. And right here you can see the conflict laid out plain as day. On one hand, an unchangeable, all-knowing, impassible God. On the other hand, an incarnate Son who absolutely changes, who learns, who suffers. The source argues this isn't just some divine mystery we have to accept, it's a direct violation of the law of non-contradiction. A being cannot be both unchangeable and changing at the very same time. Now for what the source presents as the final knockout blow. Remember Axiom 5? The absolute supreme being, the ultimate source of everything, by its very definition, cannot have a God. There's just nothing higher.
Now look at this quote. The source really wants us to pay attention to the context here. This is not Jesus on the cross in a moment of human weakness. This is the triumphant, resurrected Christ. And even in this perfected, glorified state, he says, "The Father is my God." The argument is devastatingly simple. If you have a God, you cannot be the God. According to this view, that's a direct contradiction of Axiom 5.
So if the Nicene framework really does lead to these kinds of contradictions, what's the alternative? Well, the source doesn't just tear things down, it actually proposes a different way to put all the pieces back together. It's called the agency model, and it's designed to make sense of all the biblical data without these logical collisions.
This table really lays out the two models side by side. You see, in the traditional Nicene view, you're left with what look like paradoxes. The Son is fully God, but somehow has a God. But in the agency model, the roles are crystal clear. The Father is the one supreme God, and the Son is his perfect, divinely empowered agent. In this framework, Jesus saying, "My God," isn't a paradox at all. It's just a statement of fact. And that whole problem of immutability? It's solved because the supreme being, the Father, never actually undergoes any change. And so, that leaves us with this really powerful final question. The argument we've walked through today makes a serious claim that traditional Nicene theology creates a direct conflict between its own core beliefs and the fundamental laws of logic. And if that's true, it seems to force a pretty difficult choice. It's a challenge that pushes all of us to think really deeply about where we draw the line between our faith and our reason.